Hey, finish up that breakfast and get on in here and join me in the classroom. Networking 101 coming up. You know, Networking 101 has been designed to talk about basic networking stuff, right? I mean, just anything that works across vendors. And I've really avoided talking about products on Networking 101 because I really like this to be very generic and stuff. But I got a request from Kerry out in Arkansas, and he's like, dude, can you tell me in a 101 type of fashion just what is UCS? Now, I really thought, no, I'm not going to do this, but Rob kind of said, you know, this will be pretty good because it's a real shift in how we're doing the data center and the architecture, and then he did make a really good point. So this Networking 101 will hopefully be the only one that ever be about product, but I'm going to tell you what the 101 of UCS is, because when you're looking at it, it is a completely huge fundamental shift in what we're doing in the data center. Now, what it all really amounts to is basically this square. What we're trying to reduce, if you will, the data center down to is this square. We're trying to pull all your compute resources. Now, when we're talking about data center stuff, data center is divided into two really distinct areas. There's storage and there's compute. UCS refers to compute. It's all the servers and the supporting components of that. Storage is our data warehousing component. So we're not going to cover that at all. But UCS has been designed to bring everything inside a very virtualized type of environment. And this is what really sets it apart from a lot of the competitors doing. I'm not going to talk trash about them and stuff. It's just very different in how we're setting this up. What it does is it basically ignores hardware. It ignores the servers themselves as being, you know, these little islands out there that are kind of put in racks and all that stuff. And yes, we are still putting servers in racks because that is the physical layout of how this works. But what we want to do is reduce that complexity a lot. And we want to bring all those services together that can be mutually accessed inside of this UCS type of fabric. And so by doing this, we're able to share those resources across the board, right? You're able to say, okay, this server here is, let me go ahead and just kind of green that one out a little bit. We're saying that server here is starting to run a little short on CPU resources, or it needs a little bit more memory. What can I do? Well, you can actually, UCS is smart enough to actually start borrowing those resources from other devices in that compute type of format, if you will. And we're able to share that across and get them kind of as we need on demand. Now, anything that we notice in the compute side that is outside of this square, you'll always see us trying to bring it in, right? So, for example, what is something that is very key and probably near and dear to all our hearts if you're if you're a networking geek, is probably switching, right? Switching is the fabric. It's how we interconnect, it's how we plug all that stuff in. See all the fancy words you want, it has to go through a switch, right? We noticed that, yeah, that's outside of the circle, man. We need to bring that inside so that can be part of the UCS side as well, so that's what we did. We call that product the Nexus 1000, and now it's part of this compute cycle, and now it can actually share its resources. We can assign policies here, and it's what we call a soft switch, right? It's not a hardware switch, but it's a soft switch that all these can tie into to make that compute platform really work. What else is outside that circle? Well, when you look at all these servers out here, one of the things that, again, makes them connect is, of course, a NIC card, right? They all have to have some type of cabling, some type of NIC that brings that in. So wouldn't it be great if we could reduce all that cabling? And of course, we've talked about that before with converged networking adapters, all that stuff. But again, it still requires, you know, cabling and doing some few things. In the UCS model, what we like to do is we want to bring that in, you know, kind of share the love, if you will, and we want to bring that NIC card in as well. It's just changed names a few times. I call it the N81KR, and so that fits in here. You got a virtual NIC card that you can plug into this also, and by bringing that into the side of the house, what you can do is now you can split this up, and you can say that I can have 128 virtual NICs that now I can actually do a lot more things. So I can do some load balancing with, I can do some pretty cool stuff. And because all this stuff is virtualized, now I can bring in even other appliances. I can say, hey, you know what? Let's bring in a WAS. Let's bring in a WAS appliance in here. Or let's bring in, let's say something like even like a firewall, right? So we can bring, oh, the whole thing's a firewall. But we can actually bring in like a firewall product, like a virtual ASA. We can bring in virtual routers. You can do all these pieces. But in the end, what UCS is, to understand in its absolute most basic form, it's bringing everything that's outside of compute inside of here. And that's really what we're trying to do. And that's what makes it a real fundamental shift in how we're designing out our data centers today. And there's a bunch of ways to skin the cat, and there's a bunch of ways to do this and design this. But in the end, if you're looking to do UCS, always consider the square, what fits into it, and what makes it UCS, and you'll be ready to go.